All right. All right. Welcome to Tuesday, June 14th, regular closed session meeting of the East EBMUD Board of Directors. In accordance with Government Code 54953E, this meeting will be conducted by webinar and teleconference only. A physical location has not been provided for this meeting. Roll call, please, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director McIntosh. Here. Director Mellon.
Present.
Director Patterson.
Present.
Director Young.
I am here.
President Lenny.
Here. If members of the public are online and wish to make public comment, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. And when prompted, please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. Please refrain from providing personal information such as addresses or phone numbers during public comment. If we need this information, we will have you contact staff. The Secretary will call each speaker in the order received. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. The Secretary will track time and inform each speaker when the allotted time is concluded.
I don't have any hands at the moment for public comment, and I have one hand for public comment. I have two hands for public comment. And Yvette Rivera, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha. This morning I spoke for a few minutes at the HR meeting. I asked under a Public Records Act request for all of the documentation related to a code switching workshop or a pilot workshop. There's supposed to be 3 sessions, and I wanted all of the documents related to that workshop. This afternoon, or right now, this morning, I wanted to mention that I just sent to Risha in the mail an email of the Affirmative Action and Equal Opportunity report from 2003. And I sent it because I wanted the board to have it this afternoon at the 1:15 meeting. If it can't happen this afternoon, I will discuss that report in more detail at another meeting. The reason why I sent it is because this morning, Mr. Moten provided the board a copy of the Affirmative Action, or DEI report or plan. And I wanted to highlight the difference between the reports that have been coming out for the last, I say, 10 years, and how different it is from the reports that I saw when I first arrived at the district. Section 3 in the earlier reports had a list of DEO complaints, the disposition of EEO complaints, the program challenges, and how racial discrimination or harassment continue to be the greatest EEO concern. Because that's no longer in the reports, I want to just let everybody know I submitted another Public Records Act request for all of the statement grievance forms submitted between 2017 and the present, for all of the Q-1006 EEO discrimination harassment complaint forms that were filed by East EBMUD employees from 2017 to present. And this is from anything submitted by unrepresented, confidential, locals 2019, 444, 39, and 21. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but one of the last Public Records Act requests that I made was for all of the documents associated with my last request for an extension to reply to Ms. Samber Wallace's determination letter. I was in Argentina at the last board meeting, and I asked for an extension, and my extension request was denied. Director Linney mentioned that he would look into my extension request, and I never received any response on that day. And I want all of the documentation related to my request for an extension. I want everybody's names that were involved with playing a part in forcing me to work on my vacation while I was in Argentina. That's all I have for right now. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you. Next, we have George Cleveland. You should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes start now.
Thank you, Risha. Good morning. members of the board, and General Manager Chan, and anyone else attending. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, I'm in my role as the 2019 Chief Steward. That's what this public comment is about. It has to do with apparently the interpretation of management rights as it appears in our contract. In a recent meeting with employee relations analyst Christina Harmon and manager Mike Ambrose of O&M, I don't remember his exact title, and in another meeting that I had with other HR analyst, Andrew Dadko, and on behalf of management in the contact center, there seems to be this belief that management rights are inalienable and it makes people infallible, and that basically management rights gives the management of this company to do whatever it wants, even if it goes against the best interests of the company. Whether or not it's even actually sensible. Now, we have language in the contract that says those rights should be exercised in a prudent and reasonable manner. I ask you this, if someone is recovering from cold, tested negative for COVID, and is scheduled to work from home on a couple of days at the end of the week, a Thursday and a Friday, where they don't have any contact with anyone, I'm not quite sure how prudent and reasonable it is to force the person to use their sick leave when they can work from home, because the person's work is still there, so it doesn't benefit the employee, it doesn't benefit the district, and it doubly doesn't benefit the employee because they're forced to use their sick leave when they could have worked from home, as they were scheduled to do. That's one instance of what I find to be not very particularly prudent or reasonable. The other one is one of our members who, contact center, disciplined, necessary and appropriate actually, based on the conduct, but apparently maybe not quite what management wanted, so they decided that it would be appropriate to rescind the employee's emergency telecommute. Now, if we were in what I would call normal times, that might not necessarily be an issue. But the emergency telecommute was designed so that we could work from home and we could be safe, as we're still in a COVID epidemic. And as we know from getting the emails basically daily or every other day, cases are spiking. So it doesn't seem reasonable or prudent to us, Local 2019, that anyone should have to be forced to come into work full time. We have had other members who have been disciplined during these past 2 years who were working from home, and their telecommute privileges were not revoked. And we think that in an environment where we're always trying to prioritize the health and safety of the folks, and working from home accomplishes that should be left as is. It does not make any sense. In both cases, it doesn't make any sense. We're thought of as being told that, hey, what you want to do erodes management's rights. No, we don't want to do that.
George, your 3 minutes are up. Can you conclude your comments?
I'm almost done, Risha. Thank you. I just want those rights to be exercised reasonably and prudently as they are in our contract. In these examples, they are not. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, and have a good day.
This is directed as a question towards Clifford, I guess. George has raised some interesting points, especially relating to COVID environment and workers working from home or remotely and so on. The points that he raised, could we get a updated memo on that and have hopefully whomever have the discussions with George to get all the facts, so when we get the responses back from you, there's no mixed messages, perhaps?
We can certainly prepare a memo, and maybe if Winnie could just take 30 seconds
Sure.
on the second item, on that particular instance and the conversation that had been had with 2019.
Sorry. So we have had conversations. George and I have talked. We have the person that he's talking about. We've extended their return back to the office to the end of the month at this time, based upon the fact that there is a surge, and we will revisit it based on the conditions as if COVID continues at the same rate as it is going. The person was brought back to the office and for essentially more monitoring as per the management's request, based upon an action that had occurred to result in a corrective action. So that was a operational and management coaching decision. Whether the union agrees with that direction, we are always in conversation. But we would revisit if the search continues and delay the return back to the office. So that's in regards to the second case. In the first case, I'm happy to just share that we understand the union's position. The person was provided the same direction as provided to all the employees there. The person was not cleared to work by the hotline at that time, and so the supervisor did say for them to stay and recover and not work. So those are the two scenarios.
Well, I guess on the first.
Can
Oh, go
I
ahead.
stop for a second?
Yeah.
I'm feeling uncomfortable with the level of detail that we are going into on an agenda item that is not, something that's not on our agenda, that's in public comment. We're really not supposed to be having a conversation about it. So if there's an information memo coming, that's great, but I think, I feel uncomfortable with the level of detail we're going into.
I would concur.
Okay. I'll look forward to the informational memo. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other speakers?
We have no other speakers for public comment. I have one more hand. Ross Spinner, you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes will start now.
All right, good morning. My name is Ross Spinner. I'm a 12-year employee. Actually, I just retired this last month, employee of EBMUD. I've been coming to, last month I came to 2 board meetings and talked about harassment that I incurred while I was on probation. And the reason I'm calling in today is and this might seem a little strange, but I wanted to praise Clifford Chan for his efforts in curbing the harassment. I actually talked to him and Derry Moten about this last month, about my situation, and they very kindly listened to me, and I think they have come up with a plan and a strategy to try to curb some harassment, which I think is can also help curb. I think it also curb. What am I trying to say? I'm trying. I just lost my words. I'm sorry. Let me. I think it curb. I'm sorry. So I think they come up with some policies that'll help curb harassment and racism, and so that's basically all I would like to say. I'd like to say thank you very much, Clifford and Derry, for listening to me and coming up with some ideas that I think will help solve some of East Bay Mud's problems. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ross, for taking the time to make that statement.
Okay.
Any other public comment?
I have no other hands for public comment.
All right, then, we will now convene to discuss closed session agenda items. We are scheduled to return to our regular board meeting at 1:15. Everyone, to our Tuesday, June 14th, 2022 regular meeting of the East Bay Mud Board of Directors. In accordance with Government Code Section 54953E, this meeting will be conducted by webinar and teleconference only. A physical location has not been provided for this meeting. We will receive reports from this morning's Planning and Legislative Human Resources Committee meetings and the June 8th Los Vaqueros Reservoir JPA meeting under item 28. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman? Excused.
Director Coleman excused.
Director Katz?
Present.
Director McIntosh?
Here.
Director Mellon?
Present.
Director Patterson? Director Young?
I am here.
President Lenny?
Here. All right, let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. There are no announcements required from closed session. We're now on the public comment. If members of the public are online and wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard at the beginning of the meeting. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. Please refrain from providing personal information such as addresses or phone numbers during public comment. If we need this information, we'll have you contact staff. The Secretary will call each speaker in the order received. You're allotted 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend this time based on the number of speakers. The Secretary will track time and inform each speaker when the allotted time has concluded.
We have 2 hands for public comment. Nick Lawrence, you should be able to unmute your mic.
This is Nick. Am I heard?
Yes, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, Lisa. So I'm looking here to present episode 18 of a continuing dangerous condition of the property still existing in the form of out-of-service fire hydrant 814100.
Nick, excuse me, you're a little bit hard to understand. I don't know if you're at a place with a face mask or something, but it's just a little bit hard to.
Thank you. Is this better?
That's better. Thank you.
Thank you. I wish to call attention that fire hydrant 8100 is still out of service, but lo and behold, it was placed in service on 5/26/22, according to the official EBMUD database. This notwithstanding the fact that the fire hydrant is still served by a 2-inch rubber hose and was not marked to indicate low pressure or low volume. I gather that this improper entry into the database was called to your attention because it was marked as out of service on the 8th of June, claiming it to be part of planned maintenance. I think it's still the water break that's causing it to be out of service. And somebody did come by and paint it with the red colors, indicating low flow and low pressure. But just in case management was not aware that it had been improperly noted as being incorrect. This is, of course, the database that the fire department relies upon, knowing whether they can use hydrants. Does anybody have knowledge about this?
So,
Clifford, if you could.
yeah, so there was work that was being done out, I think, Mr. Lawrence, that you are aware of, and when the maintenance crews completed the work, they had just noted that the hydrant was in service because there was still water in there, but at levels below pre-landslide areas, and so subsequently they noted as being out of service. Work on replacing that pipeline is scheduled to begin. The temporary larger 4-inch hose is scheduled to begin next week.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That concludes that report. That concludes today's episode 18. Good day.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And next we have Eric Larson. Eric, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha. This is Eric Larson, President AFSCME Local 444. I'd like to provide objection and public comment on agenda item number 16.
Okay.
All right.
So Eric, did you want to speak under item 16?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Next, we have Yvette Rivera. Yvette, you should be able to unmute your mic. And your 3
Thank you.
minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha. This morning, Mr. Moten provided the East Bay Mud Board of Directors an AAEEO plan and a DEI plan update. At that meeting, I asked for all of the documents related to the 3-session curriculum mentioned in Mr. Moten's update. the pilot workshop on code switching. I wanted all the minutes and all of the communications regarding that training. I also mentioned that I needed to see EEO and grievance forms submitted to East Bay MUD from 2017 to 2022. I made a public records request for that. And that request included all EEO Q006 forms and PE 105 forms. I assume that Saji Pierce and Ariel Bland also filled out some kind of form like that, and I'd like to see all of them. I wanted to see them because in the old days, it was a lot more transparency when the EEO and the AA report came out. At such time, this afternoon, I sent copies of the 2003 report, and it provided data on how many discrimination complaints came in, how they were handled, the challenges, the data from 1997 to 2003. I'm asking for those documents so that I can collect that data now and maybe present it at a future board meeting. I also needed all the litigation, discrimination, retaliation complaints related to Shantae Scott, including government tort complaints, because there was a Channel 7 news thing this past weekend. So that was part of my PRR, public records request. And finally, at the last board meeting, I pleaded with this board while I was on vacation in Argentina to grant me an extension to reply to the Janella Samber Wallace response to my discrimination and retaliation complaint. At that time, Director Linney directed, I'm assuming, Mr. Chan to respond or to look into my extension request. Subsequently, East Bay MUD denied my extension request, and I had to work on that reply during my vacation. I would like, through a Public Records Act, to see all of the documentation, communication by any DEI staff, any East Bay MUD director, any person in the GC office, GM's office, or any SMT from April 1st to June 10th that's related to my response to Janella Samber Wallace's determination letter, and all the way up until my vacation ended. So that's from April the 15th through June the 13th. That's all I have. Thank you. I yield.
Yvette, this is Doug Linney. I just wanted to say I did ask staff about it, as I had mentioned to you at the last meeting. I did not direct staff to do anything, nor was I planning to. I just said I would investigate or inquire about it. I was satisfied that staff work was being done well and let it proceed.
May I respond to what you just said, Director Linney?
You may.
I was on vacation. The deadline that Ms. Samber Wallace set was Thursday. I spoke at the board meeting on Tuesday. On Tuesday, I still had not heard a response. I didn't hear a response until Wednesday late afternoon. And the deadline was on my vacation, when I'm already told by my current supervisors not to work a minute over on anything related to work. Otherwise, the district sees it as unauthorized overtime. And here, the district had no problem with me being forced to reply to a determination letter while I was on scheduled vacation in South America, where there isn't internet connection like there is in the United States. Thank you for your time. I yield.
All right, I just want to say there were extensions given previously, as to my understanding. So
That's not the case. There was one extension when I was sick, and I detailed that in my correspondence that I sent Ms. Wallace, Samber Wallace, and communications that I sent to the district, including the board of directors. Thank you.
do we have any other speakers?
We have no other speakers for public comment.
All right, then we are on to our consent calendar. I've had a request to pull item 16 on that. Are there other items that we want to pull from our consent calendar?
President Lenny, can I make a note that because Director Katz is participating virtually, that we will conduct votes via roll call?
Okay, thank you for that reminder. All right, do I have a motion on items other than item 16?
I would so move. All items other than 16.
Okay, a second?
Second.
All right, motion by Frank, seconded by Marguerite. We'll have a roll call vote then on items 1 through 15 and 17 through 20.
Director Katz?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
Director Young?
Yes.
President Lenny?
Yes. All right, carries unanimously. And we're now on to item 16. Marguerite had asked that this item be pulled.
Yeah, we had we had a presentation at this morning's planning committee meeting and a lengthy discussion following, and I know that Eric would like to raise public comments, and I'd like the full board to be apprised of that discussion. And the committee did ultimately recommend approval of the amount of money, but with some stipulations that we can cover in the discussion once we've done that. So I don't know if, Eric, if you'd like to come forward and, or you're not here anymore, sorry. This morning he was in person.
Eric, you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes will start now.
Thank you, Risha, and thank you, Director Young, and General Manager and board members, and thanks for continuing to make this available online for remote public comment, and taking my comments now. AFSCME 444 maintains its objection to increasing contracting out of paving and other related services. Specifically, we object to the increasing dollar amount award of contracting out paving extensions for pipeline rebuild. This is our bargaining unit work. This is the core work of our represented paving crew foreman, paving raker A, paving raker B, paving raker C, truck driver 2, heavy transport operator, and heavy equipment operators. This is civil service work that can be performed by civil service classifications. Management chooses not to. Management has chosen not to create sufficient positions to perform this work, and management refused to bargain over their decision and its effects. The Millais, Myers, and Brown Act requires, as a mandatory subject of bargaining, impacts on working conditions. Failing to fund sufficient positions impact the working conditions of our represented classifications. Further, the Municipal Utility District Act, Public Utility Code Section 11188 prevents contracting out of work that can be satisfactorily performed by civil service. Much of this work can be performed by civil service, but management chooses not to allocate sufficient district resources to perform this work. We have put a proposal on the table. We have offered a compromise that the district allocate $2.5 million to joint paving projects, $1.25 million, $1.25 million for contracting out peak workload, what contracting out is supposed to be for, and the same amount that was awarded pre-pandemic. So $2.5 million for joint paving contracts, $1.25 million for contracting out peak workload, and allocate the remaining $1.25 million for needed additional staffing to keep up with the increasing pipeline rebuild KPIs. To which management has simply said no. They have not said why they don't need additional staff, nor why they can't hire additional staff, except that they don't want to or it takes too long. They have refused to bargain with us over this work, And so we are asking you to reject the $5 million request and instead allocate the $2.5 million specifically earmarked for joint paving projects. So specifically that $2.5 million is specifically earmarked for joint paving projects, not allocated to joint paving projects, and if it doesn't work out, we give it to the contractors. If it's for joint paving projects, let it only be for joint paving projects. And if the joint paving projects with the agencies don't work out, then figure out how to do it with district forces. Reduce the contracting out award to $1.25 million, consistent with the pre-pandemic award, and direct management to allocate sufficient resources to perform this work with civil service district forces. Thank you for taking my comments this morning, and thank you for the constructive dialogue at the Planning Committee this morning.
All right, thank you, Eric. You might want to stand by.
Would you like me to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be helpful to have,
I'd certainly like to have the benefit of discussions from this morning's meeting.
yeah.
Certainly. So what we discussed this morning at the committee meeting was we have $3 million up to of potential joint paving projects with the cities. These aren't firm commitments, but this is, again, we don't control the streets, and if the cities ask us to do joint paving projects, we'd have to work with them. And so that's $3 million right there of the $5 million. We also discussed the fact that, the cities can say they want to do it, they can always back out. So we don't have a lot of, we're not as nimble. If they say we want to do it, then they say we don't want to do it, and suddenly we have to staff up or down. So this would be part of the, that could be potentially peak workload. That said, we also discussed the fact that going forward into the next budget cycle, the fiscal year 24-25 budget cycle, which starts later this year, we will begin discussions with Local 444 earlier, around the October timeframe, to talk about staffing needs for a broader range of work, including our pipeline work and what do we need to do as we increase our pipeline rebuild, and what's the appropriate staffing for that and other related work with Local 444. But we recommended moving forward with the $5 million allocation. And I know Eric talked about the $1.25 million, which was allocated the last time, but since then, as we're aware, we shared with the committee, asphalt prices move with petroleum prices, and that's been going up, as well as other inflationary pressures as well as standards with the cities increasing. Did I capture that all, Director Young?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll let other planning committee members speak as well. I mean, last month, the planning committee, really directed staff to, sit down with the union and sharpen their pencils and try to figure out where there was some room. And so I have to sadly say I was a little disappointed to see the same proposal come back this morning, and not to hear some ground being made around principles. I mean, some thoughts that and so we did recommend, coming out of the committee, as Clifford indicated, that there really be some clear principle and interest-based discussion about the work that district forces do, in addition, and to try to really work on this topic of cost sharing, which there's no there's some things that there's no disagreement. There's no disagreement that having the cities take over paving works when it works. I think the dispute is when the cities back out, that money automatically moves to contracting. What if, instead of doing that, the cost sharing money sat in a kind of a reserve that basically if we're seeing a trend of cost sharing increasing, let's keep that in reserve. If it doesn't get spent, it rolls over, but then you can have district forces come in. They're probably, and then you define what the work is, that's appropriate for district forces. I think everybody agrees that big cluster projects are not appropriate for district forces. But there probably is some pipeline work that would be appropriate for district forces, that is not significantly more expensive for district forces to do than contractors. You know, it's also been pointed out that most of our paving contractors are non-union. There are a lot of union paving contractors in the Bay Area. And so I'm wondering if there are conditions in our RFP for paving contractors that should include and embrace some of our DEI principles and more than prevailing wage things. So I think there's a lot that could be talked about here. And I really, my own, I've gone outside of the committee discussion this morning as I've reflected more on this. But that, so again, the committee's recommendation was to approve the staff proposal with the stipulation that there is work that has to be done and work that has to be figured out associated with our continued work on pipeline and paving as a thing together.
But there was also, our general manager was very specific about bringing this back to us in the near future. And I think it was a unanimous vote earlier this morning because of Clifford's messaging going forward. And Clifford, would you be so kind as to repeat that for the full board, please?
Yes, so we start the fiscal year 24-25 budget cycle operating later this year, and capital, later this year and early next year. And then next year we do the budget workshops with the board. And so what we also committed to do is we would come back to the committee in advance of those discussions to present some of the findings or the discussions that we've had with the unions as far as staffing in advance of the budget workshop with the board.
Yes. That.
So are there, I'm not the president of the board. Go ahead, Doug, sorry.
I want to see if there are any other questions or discussion on this. Frank?
The thing that kind of bothered me, and it still does, is getting a sense of, when you're costing out projects, it really is a basic set of costs per yard, per half mile. And I felt like until this morning, we really hadn't been given a good sense of what our costs stack up against the contractors. And listening to the numbers, it's, I worked in the concrete industry. They figure everything they can tell you by the foot how much it costs to pour a yard of concrete. Asphalt is not all that much different. And getting that sense of how the numbers stack up has been, what's the word I'm looking for, amorphous? It's been a little bit difficult. Now, we went forward with today because there's some timelines that have to be taken care of for this near future. But I have to say, the data that we got today was at best a slight peek at what the costs are, but I don't know that if I was trying to run a project, I would feel comfortable with the numbers, either from what is related to the contractors or to our own staff. So then I fall back on what I get beat up on frequently. I didn't say this morning, but I've been involved with the building trades for a long time, and they beat up on us regularly about, why do you guys not contract this out enough? And when I point out to them, well, you probably want to chat with the unions in-house, they say that's not an answer. So I think when you bring this back to us.
Yeah, we're not contracting to them, we're contracting to non-union contractors.
I'm sorry,
We're contracting to non-union contractors, we're not contracting to union.
But there is both that I get the word on. The union contractors, are likewise saying, why aren't they not getting the work? Now, I've been assured that the non-union contractors are following prevailing wage. And that's a requirement. I don't ever want to hear that we bent prevailing wage, nor have I heard from the fair contracting group that prevailing wage isn't being followed. But it's still the same issue. How is this work being costed? And that's what I would expect when you bring it back to us, that it's not just 10% difference, 50% difference. I want numbers per yard. Because those numbers are going to be pretty much representative of us versus contracting. You know, as opposed to percentages that might be or might not be. The costs are very uniform. The kind of costing out is pretty uniform. So that's, Doug, that's the angst I've had with this.
Director Katz has his hand up.
I'm sorry?
Yeah. Go ahead, Andy.
Thanks. I would like to express agreement with some of the principles that I'm hearing reported out from the Planning Committee as articulated by Director Young. I would like to see this conversation continue to keep going. And I'm very interested in additional information that's not particularly covered in the staff report, especially the long-term plan for what would be the percentage of paving that we would do in-house. We see a number that was quite high prior to the pandemic, 98%, but we see a number that's much lower now. And what I'm missing here is really understanding what the amount of additional staffing, the amount of additional paving crews that it would take to get up to a reasonable number that would keep our staff utilization adequate and reasonable. And beyond that amount, it would make sense to contract out for truly peak work. But I'm not seeing an analysis that really identifies our anticipated practices in the future to identify and quantify what is that peak. I do agree that it makes sense to work with cities because we are borrowing their streets and cooperating with the streets that they're working in. And they also have a greater way of being able to have a stable workload for their staff. So I think our city partnerships do make sense. But as for the contracting out with the private sector, I think we need to be maximizing our use of district forces along the lines of what's been discussed so far. I'd like to also request that for future BD1s, that we have the report explain the way that work will be allocated among multiple contractors. And for this specific award, should it pass, I think that we should get a memo that explains that method. As part of forwarding staff a complaint from a fair contracting group, I did receive a response that explained the answers to that question, but I think it needs to be in public and in our public records what that method is, because our staff are applying an objective method, but I don't recall what it is. I would like to actually see it in a memo to the board and for the board to know what that method is at the time of adoption. Thanks.
So maybe just quickly, Director Katz, so within the BD1, we do describe that for work that's under $10,000, we allocate the work on a rotational basis to the contractors. When it's over $10,000, we ask for bids from the contractors that we have, and that we go with the lowest bid to do the work. And I understand the interest in trying to figure out what is that optimal staff. And I understand that we're not at the point where the cities have said they want to do all the joint paving work, but we're going to have to make some assumptions as far as what that trend will look like, because not that I see this coming in the near future, but if the cities do say they want to do all the paving for the extension work, we can't stop them. And so we will make some assumptions when we look at the staffing, but just for the board to understand that we don't control a lot of this, and we can base on historical numbers of how much work that we do jointly and how much that we do with district forces. But there will be some assumptions in there, and what we're trying to do is not stray too far, where if the cities say they want to do it, we know the cities aren't going to take over the patch paving work. That much we know they're not interested in after the main breaks or service leaks. We know historically what they've done in terms of joint paving projects. But we have to just be cautious that we don't want to go so far that if the cities say they want to do everything, which I don't foresee, I just want to be very clear, that we don't end up with nothing for the staff to do. And so there may be that sweet spot, which I think is what Director Young is asking. Do that analysis of where that sweet spot is based on the assumptions that we know today and some projections for joint paving projects. And so there will be assumptions in this analysis, but just for the board to understand why it's not as clear cut as maybe some other type of work where we actually own the asset.
Clifford, could you address an issue that Eric brought up in terms of work that needs to be conducted by civil service, or that could be conducted by civil service workers? He cited a code somewhere, has to be done by civil service.
Yeah, so this came up during the planning committee discussion as well as far as the language that we put in the BD1. So you'll see a very similar, identical language. And anytime we do work for the fully maintained operated work, the FM&O work, the MUD Act says that we can contract out from time to time if the work cannot be satisfactorily performed by district forces. It doesn't mean that district forces doesn't do that work at all. It just means that with our staffing or other types of needs. So even if we just did it for peak workload, or even, as I was telling the committee today, even if this contract were strictly for joint paving projects, we would still include the same language in there because somebody else is doing the work that we have staff to do. Does that clarify?
Yeah, I think so. All right, so is there a substitute motion, so to speak?
Well, I'll move that we adopt the recommendation for as stated in the BD1 with the caveat that, we are not done with this conversation, and to Clifford's point around process to identify, go deeper and get more granular about this and look for opportunities to resolve this contention.
Can I get a second for that? Second. All right, motion by Marguerite, seconded by Lisa. Any further discussion? All right, let's have a roll call vote on that.
Okay. Director Coleman absent. Director Katz?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson? Yes. Director Young?
Yes.
President Lenny?
Yes. All right, carries on a vote of 6-0. Thank you, Planning Committee, for doing the work on this. Thank you, Eric, for your comments and vigilance and discussion. And thank you, staff, for continuing to work with them on that. So, more to come. But that finishes our consent calendar. We're on to item 21, which is a public hearing. We are going to now conduct a public hearing to consider revisions to the water and wastewater system schedules for rates and charges, capacity charges, and other fees recommended in the report and recommendations of the general manager for revisions to the water and wastewater system schedule of rates and charges, capacity charges, and other fees not subject to Proposition 218, and regulations for fiscal year 2023, submitted to the board on May 10th, 2022. The hearing is now open. We will receive a presentation from Director of Finance, Sophia Skoda, and then public comment.
Thank you. That was
A lot of words.
Yes, I will. So yes, we now are in the public hearing to adopt our fiscal year 2023 budget along with our proposed non-218 rates and charges and regulations. So if we switch to our second slide here, there we go. We We're here on May 10th, where we filed the report and the recommendation of the general manager for revisions to the water and wastewater system of schedule of rates and charges, capacity fees, and other fees that are not subject to Proposition 218, in addition to a few changes to our regulations for fiscal year 23. And we are now, we did begin noticing of the public hearing on May 19th for today's meeting. We held a board workshop on May the 24th, and we are now asking that the board take action and adopt our non-Proposition 218 rates and charges. These would take effect on July the 1st. And in the case of wastewater, where we have the wet weather facilities charge that's collected on the property tax bill for those that are in our wastewater service area, we ask that the board set a public hearing and adoption rate of July 12th so that we can make the county assessors dates to get that on the tax bill. So in terms of a very quick summary of the proposed updates to our rates and charges, we talked about changes that essentially allow us to recoup the cost of service for the different charges that we have here, things like water service installation charge, private fire service, etc. And so we went over these at our last meeting, and details are included, of course. We also discussed some proposed updates to our water service regulations, just a few here, to Section 3, Section 4, and Section 15 on discontinuation of service. So with that, we can take any questions, and I'm here for that, and my team is here as well.
Any questions, comments on this? Seems like we've had discussions and meetings about it before. Is there any public?
It's like all of this is we've heard before.
I actually have one hand for public comment.
Okay.
Sean Selecki, you should be able to unmute your mic, and your 3 minutes start now.
Hi, thank you. My name is Sean Selecki. We're a developer construction company out of Oakland, and we work mainly new construction in Montclair and Piedmont. We do want to thank EBMUD for all their hard work in keeping up with the work demand. We specialize in new construction, so we do work quite a bit with EBMUD on new water meter. This is a job that cannot be done by civil services and qualified local contractor, and it's a work that has to be done by EBMUD. And it's also an expensive work that requires a lump sum payment, and they will not accept payment plan. We have done this sort of work in other areas at Solano County, and we know the expected cost, and the EBMUD cost for this process is about 300% more. We initially received a quote from EBMUD on January 2020 for an estimated of $46,400. And on March 2022, we received an estimate that was lowered by approximately $10,000, which was great to see. And now we're hearing that this cost will increase again. We'd like to have a better understanding and try to understand why this service cannot be done by local qualified contractors, and why they increase again when they recently was lowered, but still was about 300% higher than local contractors performing this job.
This is Sophia Skoda. Sean, thank you for helping to develop housing in our community. Just to start off, I don't know exactly what that cost was, what all was involved with that, because we have a number, as you know, a number of different costs that go along with developing a new property. We did have a reduction in our capacity fee last year, and that was in coordination with a study that was completed by an outside consultant that really showed that the changes that our community has made with respect to water conservation means that the demand on our system from a new home is lower than it once was. And so that was reflective of the decrease that you saw. With respect to the increase that you're seeing this year, we make an effort to keep up with inflation, and so we adjust our capacity fees to keep up with the cost of inflation and the cost of new construction. And so that's why there is a cost increase this year. And if you look backwards in our records, you'll see that annually staff does recommend an annual increase to reflect whatever the increases are in the building costs and in our costs as well. So that said, I don't know all the details, of course, of this particular case. I don't know if that's helpful. I don't know, Andrew Lee, if you have anything to add. Okay.
Sean, did you have additional comments?
I do.
Okay.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you for responding. Is there any way or anybody in particular that we could be in contact with, or could you guys allow developers as us, and where we're developing new homes for the community and people resident of Oakland, where we could contact them, make a payment plan, and now we're expected to make this lump sum payment in a very short time period. I think July was our deadline, beginning of July. So is there anyone that we could speak to, get in contact with, where we could get a payment plan and kind of work a process? Because this is difficult for people that generate revenue for City of Oakland.
Sean, my name is Andrew Lee, and I'm the Director of Customer Service at EBMUD. You can actually reach out to me and our new business office to kind of have that dialogue to see what we can do to support your project.
Thank you so much, Andrew Lee.
Thank you.
Any other speakers?
I don't have any other speakers for public comment.
All right then. May I have a motion to close the public hearing? Okay, moved by Director Patterson. Second by Director Mellon. We'll have a roll call vote to close the public hearing.
Director Coleman, absent. Director Katz?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
Director Young?
Yes.
President Lenny?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. We will now close the public hearing. We'll now move to determination and discussion in order to consider the related action.
So you just heard the presentation for item 22, so I don't know if there's any additional discussion before the board considers that item.
I don't think so.
Would it be appropriate to move items 22, 23, and 24, and 25 all at the same time?
Maybe not 25, but 22, 23, and 24. If you'd like to do all three, let me add a little background for 23 and 24 before, just so it's on the record on those items. So item 23 is affirming our capital and operating budgets. And as we shared in the budget workshop at the last board meeting, the only change is to add the $33.3 million for drought contingency. And then for item 24, which was also discussed at the workshop, that's our position resolution. And as discussed, there will be a net increase of 3.5 FTEs. And just quickly going through it, we're converting a 1/2 FTE temporary confidential senior admin clerk to a full-time senior admin to support public record inquiries. We're converting an LT senior HR analyst to a regular position to support the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Culture. We're adding 2 positions to the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Culture, 1 senior HR analyst and 1 executive assistant. We're adding 2 LT positions, 1 public information representative and 1 community affairs representative that would only be used as part of our drought actions. We're deleting 2 temporary construction admin clerk positions that were used for our lead tap project. And then we have a number of classification actions for equity adjustments, a new classification, and a title change for 11 positions. So we're adding a water reclamation operator. We have equities for heavy equipment operator if agreement is reached on a revised job classification. We're changing the title for the diversity inclusion officer to the manager of diversity inclusion. And then we have additional management equity positions that we shared with the board at the last workshop. And that covers items 23 and 24.
So I offer a motion to approve 22, 23, and 24.
All right, I have a motion from Director Mellon on 22, 23, 24. Do I have a second?
A second.
Director Patterson seconds that. We'll take a roll call vote.
Okay. Director Coleman is absent. Director Katz?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
Director Young?
Yes.
President Linney?
Yes. All right, carries unanimously 6-0. Item 25.
Item 25. So as the board is aware, COVID case rates remain high. We've had over 100 cases, employee cases in May, and so far around 66 in June. We'll continue to track the cases at the district and in the Bay Area. At this time, we're recommending continue to adopt the resolution to hold meetings via teleconference under Government Code Section 54953E, so we can adjust our meetings as needed if the situation worsens. And just to be clear for the board, that just allows for us to conduct virtual meetings as needed. But unless you hear from me otherwise, the board will be present at the board meetings. But the meetings would be virtual for the public to participate in.
Just a question to sort of clarify, sort of how this works. When we do have that motion in place, the Brown Act requirements for noticing absence or participating virtual participation by a board member are waived or not? I'm just, it's like just unclear.
That is correct. Yeah, so under AB 361, when the board is acting under the authority of a resolution like this, it suspends the requirements for noticing the location of board members that are meeting telephonically or remoting.
For
in.
any purpose.
Yes, and it also allows us, for safety purposes, to exclude members of the public and allow them to remote into the meeting via Zoom.
Okay. I did not, I didn't understand that. I thought we were because we're here, that we're operating under a presumption of physical presence or availability of the public to where we are when we're meeting, but not when we're virtual. That's what you're saying. It's like once we've adopted this resolution, whether we've decided to actually meet virtually or not completely, it's like there's two steps.
Correct. It allows you to choose to stay home if you want, and
any of us could choose to stay home. We could all just not show up.
Well, yes, not physically. You should
physically
still,
not show up.
But I do ask that if you aren't going to participate in person, that you probably let President Linney and let me know so we can do the planning for the board meeting.
I'd actually like, I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but is it possible to make a motion that we expect our board members to be here unless they have gone through what even if they don't have to publicly notice where they are and all of that, that we basically adopt in spirit as much of the Brown Act as we can, to say that, being at your vacation house because we're meeting virtually isn't a reason to be virtual, because if you can get here. I mean, obviously if you're in Oslo, Norway at a climate conference, it would be tough to get here. But I mean, I just would like to, I don't know.
I think you just stated that, and I think we all agree. I don't know that we need
Okay,
a particular
don't need a
motion
motion.
for that.
Okay.
All right. Are we ready to vote on this item?
I do want to state for the record that I am not on vacation. I am in Bonn, Germany at a climate conference, and look forward to joining the board in person, assuming that it's safe for me and the board to do so. But I do intend to be with the board at our next meeting.
All right, thank you, Andy. I should have given you an opportunity to state that earlier. All right, do we already have a motion and a second on that?
No.
We do not.
We do not.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
Moved by Director McIntosh, seconded by Director Mellon. Let's have a roll call vote.
Okay, Director Coleman absent. Director Katz?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
Director Young?
Yes.
President Lenny?
Yes. Okay, carries unanimously on a 6-0 vote.
Just out of curiosity, Andy, what time is it there?
It's 11 o'clock
PM.
p.m. Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're on to the general manager's report.
Not quite. So next we have Jennifer Williams, Special Assistant 1,
Oh,
who
sorry.
will provide the
Oops.
legislative update.
Good afternoon, President Lenny and members of the board. So yes, I have, as I said this morning, hopefully what's a happy ledge report. 3 bills, 1 state measure, 2 federal measures, and we're recommending support on all 3. First up is AB 2142, a water conservation related measure that was discussed earlier this year, and we're bringing it back to you. AB 2142 would reinstate the state income tax exemption for turf replacement rebate and voucher programs that was in place, I believe, earlier from 2014 to 2019, but expired. During prior board discussion, there was a concern raised about PFAS in artificial turf. The author explored the issue and opted not to address that in this bill, and the bill is moving forward as is, so we're recommending support.
So it does include artificial turf as a district can decide to do it, or the state is offering it?
The state rebate would offer the tax exemption for those vouchers and rebates. My understanding is that that's not part of the district's program.
Correct.
Mr. President?
Yes.
At our Human Resources Committee meeting this morning, we received the presentation on all 3 bills, AB 2142, Gabriel, S 4231, Feinstein, and S 4279, Padilla, and we voted unanimously to support
Okay.
each of those.
Do we want to hear more on those, or?
No, we're good.
I think that our presenter might want to have a little bit more time at the podium for her first time presenting, but
We'll have plenty of time in the future.
Well, I'm happy to defer to the board, but we do have S 4231 by Senator Feinstein and S 4279 by Senator Padilla, and we are recommending support positions as Director McIntosh.
You made a motion.
Yes, that was a motion.
I'll second your motion.
Okay. Motion to confirm those recommended positions made by Director McIntosh, seconded by Director Mellon. I'll have a roll call vote.
Okay, Director Coleman absent. Director Katz?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Mellon?
Yes.
Director Patterson?
Yes.
Director Young?
yes.
President Lenny?
Yes, carries unanimously on a vote of 6-0. We have update on other issues.
On other issues, I think a brief maybe state budget update for you all. State legislature did approve a placeholder budget yesterday. That is an agreement between the legislative leaders and does not reflect agreement with the governor yet. And those negotiations will be ongoing. And we expect details of the actual budget to come in the coming weeks and months through trailer bills. Anything else I can?
Does that, the placeholder agreement have I mean, what are the significant elements that relate to us in terms of whether there's, more arrearage money or, lifeline rate money or, anything like that in there that
I
we should
think
hang on
the
to?
high level on all of that of programs and things that would relate and be of importance to the district are yet to be determined, and the negotiations are ongoing.
Are we going to get any money back from the governor from his surplus?
There's also not quite agreement between the legislative leaders and the governor on how to return or make rebates. They have not agreed on what that is.
I'll believe it when I see it.
We personally or East Bay Mud?
I'd like to see it dispersed broadly. And if East Bay Mud can get a couple extra nickels, by golly, I'm all for it.
All right, any other questions?
Well, I have one. We appreciate you being here to present, but it should not go unnoticed that the reason that you're here is that we are, and I think we're going to make you come up here. I know you didn't want to and didn't want to fuss, but too bad that Marlene is about to retire.
Don't go too far.
I thought we had strict instructions.
No, what I heard, what my GM told me yesterday was that she didn't want a big fuss, but,
You've got 5 months, so.
Oh, 5 months, okay, go
Yeah,
sit down. But this should be a warning to you that you are not getting away without, proper.
Warning not to come back.
Yeah, you've given her a heads up now.
All right.
Might be the last time we see her.
Yeah, I don't think so.
There's a requirement that she has to fill out a time card and present it upstairs.
I apologize, Marlene, I only made a suggestion, so.
We appreciate you.
A lot.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. So next for the general manager's report, we have a brief presentation on our drought response, including recent actions taken by the state. Dave Briggs, Director of Operations and Maintenance, will begin the presentation.
Okay, good afternoon, President Linney, members of the board, and good evening, Director Katz. Let's see here, am I in control of things at the podium? I am. Okay, so just briefly, as the board remembers, we were able to divert nearly 34,000 acre-feet of water from the CVP over the past 12 months. That was part of the 2021 Bureau of Reclamation contract year allocation. We were allocated slightly more than that, about 1,300 acre-feet more. We were unable to divert that because we shut the project down in January due to the condition of limited storage opportunity here locally from all the rainfall that we got in October and December. So we were running out of storage and had to suspend things for a while. As you also know, the allocation from 2022 from the Bureau of Reclamation was grim, probably maybe the worst year the CVP has ever had. If it wasn't the worst, it was maybe the second worst. And so allocations for municipal and industrial contractors was limited to public health and safety levels. East Bay Mud did not have a compelling argument to make for a public health and safety allocation. I guess that can cut both ways. Based on our access to transfer water through Freeport and our relatively good carryover storage, we were above health and safety levels. So we got nothing from the CVP this year. Meanwhile, Mike Togolini's group has been busy trying to acquire as much water as possible. That has yielded up to 20,000 acre-feet of water that we will purchase from Placer County and begin diverting in about a month. That operation should conclude before September is out, and at that point we will wait and see what unfolds in the subsequent winter, whether the water comes from the sky or through the transfer market, or both. We'll be ready to take it. And with that, I'm going to hand it to Mike.
Thank you, Dave. Good afternoon.
So just an update on recent state and federal activities. These are actually all state activities. There hasn't been much to report at the federal level, but at the state level, I think the board's aware that the governor called a meeting of the largest water districts in the state on May 23rd. Clifford and I participated in that meeting in person in Sacramento. At that time, the governor was concerned, expressed concern about the poor conservation numbers that were coming out in March statewide, especially in Southern California, where they were seeing increases in customer use from March of 2020 to March of 2022. There was an opportunity to discuss ideas moving forward, ways to coordinate on messaging, and ultimately the governor said that he was looking at a 60-day period and wanted to see improvement in the numbers, in the conservation numbers statewide, before deciding whether or not to take action, a mandatory statewide conservation goal, potentially. So we're within that 60-day period. Numbers are still coming in. We've determined that there are some ways that we can help the process by reporting preliminary information to the state so that they can get an early read on where the conservation numbers are going. So we've been doing that. East Bay Mud has been reporting some of its water production data, not just billed consumption, but actually our water production data. So we have some information that we've been sharing that way. On May 24th, the very next day, the state board adopted emergency drought regulations, a number of regulations, including regulations that prohibit irrigation of non-functional turf that's not being used for recreation or other purposes for commercial and industrial properties. And then just on June 7th, last week, the state board reimposed curtailment of water rights on the McKellamie River that affected both the Pardee and Comanche water rights. Staff reviewed the calculation done by the state board and expressed some concerns about that curtailment, and in fact met with the state board over the last couple of days. And the late breaking news from just about an hour ago is that the state has granted a 1-week exemption on curtailment for East Bay Mud's water rights. So we're able to continue to store up until about the end of this week. Now the recession curve is showing that with snowmelt declining, that at some point, probably within the next 2 weeks, we're going to be at a point where the required flows on the lower McKellamie are greater than the true natural inflow, so that curtailment will no longer impact our storage. So gaining this extra week actually was a pretty significant benefit for us. Whether we get any more time another week, we don't know, but every day, every week helps. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea Polk.
Mike, can I ask first?
Sure.
The numbers are pretty stark. New York Times did an article I noticed, said the average Californian uses 83 gallons per day of water per day per person. San Francisco, less than that, 40, it's got a pop up that just jumped here, 40 gallons per day. Residents of Riverside County use 137 gallons a day. What's the governor, because I know he governs the whole state here, but there's obviously, and as you pointed out, Southern California is using more, it's not cut back, it's actually using more. It does seem like there needs to be some differentiation here. What's the proposal for that?
No proposals come forward yet. The governor was not focused on gallons per capita use. He was focused on a percentage reduction from 2020. And he specifically spoke to Los Angeles, who had seen a pretty dramatic increase, and it said that we expect to see some dramatic changes. So there was no specific proposal laid out by the governor's office regarding what they would do.
Yeah, and one of the things we did highlight in the meeting is that there are differences between the state, but the governor also just shared his thought that, he is the governor for the entire state. We had a subsequent meeting with Chair Esquivel at the state board and asked him specifically, does he know what what is the governor thinking in 60 days if he doesn't meet the goal? And he was not able to share exactly what the governor is thinking.
When he doesn't meet the goal.
Yeah, I mean, the expectation is, I think that's what he's thinking is headed, where it's headed, just given where the whole state's going. So we don't know if he's thinking 10%, 15%. If I had to guess, he's thinking 15% statewide. But they haven't been specific, and we've asked specifically what is he thinking, and we don't actually have an answer.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously found out a number of years ago when we put in drought restrictions and kind of had across the board, use from the past as a way to measure that, and realized that's just a terrible way to try and do this. I'm just wondering if the governor's going to find out the same thing, where people who are already conserving a lot or who already have good water control, if you will, measures in place, are being penalized to the same extent that others are, that there's going to be a revolt.
Yeah, I mean, that could be. We also shared in that subsequent meeting with Chair Esquivel that even if we hit, because we're using a 2020 baseline, even if we hit the low that we did in the first drought, we would not be at 15%. We would only be at 13%. So we would have to go below where we were in the lowest levels we were in the last drought because of the baseline they chose in 2020.
Because we hadn't fully recovered from our use from the last. That's correct.
Exactly. So just to put in perspective of, because they're thinking, well, if you can just reach that level, then that might be good. And we just remind them that level doesn't equate to 15% if that's what the governor is thinking. So we're hoping this messaging gets to the governor, since we're talking to Chair Esquivel, that it's a little more complicated than just a flat number.
Well, and it doesn't take into account that 2019 was a really wet year.
Yeah, and I would say that
reduced demand.
Exactly, and I would say the CUA agencies, working with Mike's staff, I mean, we're working together to, and the state has been receptive. Staff and Chair Esquivel and Secretary Crowfoot have been very receptive to hear, how this is more complicated than a single number. So they're listening. We hope that this will result in something that makes sense.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I've always made sure in any of my conversations, I mention that in the East Bay MUD district, our ratepayers have always been conserving. And so we don't want to be penalized for doing good. In other words, don't take us below what we are doing, because that gets down to the individual day use and everything else. And if you have a successful program, you shouldn't have to do on top of that whatever that set amount is, especially if it's 15%.
Yeah, it would be far better to set a gallons per day ET-based something. Right.
Yeah. And to be fair to the state, Chair Esquivel did share that, that's where he wants to go. He wants to set more GBCD as a threshold than just a flat percent. That makes more sense. But in this current drought, they're just not ready for something like that. But that is where the state wants to go. So that's very good to hear from the state.
Okay, I'll turn it over to Andrea.
Good afternoon. I just want to provide an update on the media outreach and other outreach that we're working on with conservation. So the Water Conservation Office continues to use messaging in the home water reports and their water budgets and newsletters. Our customer pipeline will continue for the foreseeable future to include drought-related articles. So as you may be aware, the May-June issue focuses on drought and essentially what customers can do to save water. And then the upcoming July-August issue also focuses on water conservation, kind of East Bay MUD leading by example, what we're doing and what you can do at home. On social media, we continue to post about both water supply and water conservation. And on the media side, I would say that we continue to have a lot of interest from local media. I think most recently there were questions regarding curtailment, and there is a ever-present need and interest by the media to talk about what customers can do. So to that end, tomorrow on Wednesday, Water Conservation's Charles Bolig will be doing essentially an indoor and outdoor water audit at their chief meteorologist home. He has just replaced, he has done some work and he has installed a flow meter. So they're going to be talking about flow meters as one example of how technology in our customers' hands can help conservation. And you can see from the report, there's just a variety of coverage on radio, television, and print on this issue, and will continue to be a credible source of that information. Let's see, how do I make this go forward? I don't even know. Okay. Is that me? That's not me. Mike? Okay, sorry.
Can I ask Ashley, can I ask a
Yes.
question? So I've been in a couple of community meetings and other interactions with people over the last, few weeks, and they're trying to reconcile the 10% and the 15%. And the question that always comes up is, from somebody who's one of our superstars, I already use, we use, 25 gallons a day. How do you expect us to do another, 10%, which actually for them, they probably could. But where people don't get that it's not, we're not
Right.
doing the individual targeting. And it's hard to message that.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to think about what, how we could do that better. I mean, I know we had Strive for 35 the last time for indoor water use, and then some sort of best practices, but maybe we could really highlight some of those superstars. I mean, really say, hey, it's possible, to use this family, what if there's some way to do that where we're actually really lifting those folks up, who are doing this, all day, every day, right? Might be a way to basically say, congratulations, you are exempt. You don't have to do anything else. Look at what you're doing. Some way to just, clarify that it's work. And I know it's hard. I have a hard time.
I think that's a great idea, and we are looking at ways to, hold people up as inspiration, as examples of what can happen. And also I would say we're trying to kind of help people understand, like, if they are, for example, trying to save 10%, like, so what is that? So if an average user is 200 gallons a day, how much is 20 gallons a day? Well, it's like, 1 day less of irrigation. It's, whatever. So we try to provide very specific.
2 less loads of laundry, or
yeah, exactly. So we'll continue to work on ways to help make it real for our customers, for sure. And I also, what was I going to add? We are instituting kind of our next year campaign, so there'll be an ad in Diablo Magazine. We're certainly focusing on outdoor watering right now because this is where we have the greatest opportunity, of course. So Diablo Magazine, and then our Clear Channel ads will be going up likely in August, up and down the 80 and 880 corridor for West of Hills customers. And we are also working with and talking to the Save Our Water folks about having a Save Our Water Day here in the Bay Area. Not sure yet what that looks like, but we're trying to work with our peers as well.
And then I believe Kelly has been in at least one meeting with the state and their public information staff, and maybe Andrea, you were in that meeting as well, to coordinate with the state on messaging. So there's just coordinated messaging across the state.
Yep.
The other thing, Andrea,
yes.
I always lift up HOAs and our messaging to them because I don't receive a water bill. And so how do we get to those HOAs? Are we sending something directly to management of the HOA?
I can check with Water Conservation. They have a better grasp because they work with them on landscape issues.
Okay.
So I'll work with Alice on how we can reach them, and then the members of homeowners associations, individuals, we want to reach through social media, community events,
Yeah.
and other ways. And certainly, we're hoping that our new CRM process will allow non-bill payers to sign up for information from us.
Okay,
So
that would be
we'll
great.
we'll continue to, we want that very much. We want to
And
be able to
most of
reach
us-
everyone.
Most of us don't even know what a water bill looks like because it goes to our management of
Right.
the HOA.
Yep.
So that's just a huge population of people who really need information.
And reaching out to renters and HOAs was included in
Renters
the
as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
our water shortage emergency action plan that was approved by the board. It's in there. But Andrew might have more details on what we're actually doing.
Yeah, as we, I guess share with the board during the last presentation by Alice, so we're definitely doing what we can to reach out to the HOA management and as well as any type of, landlords to promote conservation messages. And then on Director Young's message about recognizing people who are doing a great job in saving, obviously we want to recognize them. And we'll come back to you in the next board meeting and talk about probably in more detail how we're going to utilize the Super Saver recognition program to really get the message out about encouraging all the great work that people are doing and continue that effort going forward. So.
Great, thank you.
Okay, just to wrap up, we'll continue to come to the board with updates on a regular basis, including at the next board meeting. We're working on our permitting and implementation of our water transfer purchase from Placer County Water Agency, and are hoping to have everything lined up to start moving that water through Freeport on July 15th. We'll provide an update on our water supply projections, any impacts from curtailment that may or may not occur. We'll talk about water conservation rebate increases as well. We're continuing to implement the water shortage emergency action plan that the board approved on May 20th. And we're going to continue to promote our messaging, working with the state, working with other entities in the region to maximize the outreach that we can achieve and get the message out. And with that, I have to answer any other questions.
I don't see any. Thanks, Mike.
Actually,
Go ahead.
Mike, there's the projection for this coming weekend, I think it is, for there to be some snow in the mountains, or did I catch that wrong?
I don't think there's anything measurable expected.
No? Okay. I'll keep hoping.
Yep.
Thank you. So for our last presentation, we want to share with you our strategic communications plan. This plan incorporates input from many stakeholders as well as staff and the board. Kelly Zito will share with you an overview of the plan.
Okay, can you hear me okay? All right, great. Well, good afternoon, President Lenny and members of the board. Today, I'm very pleased to share with you our strategic communications plan that we have been developing with Katz and Associates, a consulting firm. No relation to Director Katz, as far as I know. Here with us virtually, I believe, is Karen Snyder, who's Vice President of Katz and Associates. She might be lurking there in the background. I think she's just here as backup in case there's any other questions she can address. So here's our agenda for today. Development of the plan, the analysis of our strengths and weaknesses from a communication standpoint, our communication vision, key messaging themes, goals and strategies and tactics of the plan, and then next steps. I will note here that the presentation format looks a little different, and there's some good reasoning behind that, which I will dive into a little bit later in the presentation. So before we jump into what went into the plan, I just want to step back for a moment and recap why we started this effort. So after nearly 100 years of service, our responsibilities obviously have grown immensely. And so have the community that we serve, our communication channels, the thirst for information. And then second, while our customers still view us favorably, we are starting to hit a ceiling in terms of some of our ratings. And it's clear that there's a lack of knowledge about all that EBMUD does in terms of service, planning, and industry leadership. So as we continue to invest in infrastructure, ask our customers to support our budget and rates, and strive to find innovative new ways to deal with the challenges of the future, we realize we need to better inform and engage with our community to increase understanding of who we are, what we do, and why we do it.
And so we began developing the strategic communications plan a little more than a year ago to evaluate sort of where we've been, and even more importantly, evaluate our communication challenges and opportunities going forward. In addition to analyzing recent quantitative survey research and focus groups, Katz & Associates also met with employees at all levels of the organization, external community members, and also you, members of the board. You might recall that after we presented a draft of this plan to the planning committee last year, Katz & Associates set up one-on-one interviews with most of you. You provided great input, feedback, suggestions, asked a lot of great questions, and we incorporated those into the plan, which we hope to begin implementing this year. Going forward, there will be other opportunities to provide additional input as we launch into our centennial effort, which really is the springboard for many of the strategies and tactics outlined here. We'll also come back to the board next year to update you on our progress. So based on all of the research and interviews, here's what Katz & Associates found in terms of our strengths and challenges from a communication standpoint. Our strengths are that we have a great story to tell, and there's a growing thirst for information about what we do. We have a dedicated team of professionals who are proud of the work that they do, and we're seen as providing high-quality water and wastewater services. Our challenges are that by sheer volume, sometimes our messaging is diffused, and we're often responding reactively to emerging needs. We've also seen some decline in customer opinion. To be clear, when you look at the data, people believe our water and wastewater services are strong. They have good feelings about our services. However, their rating of the overall job that East Bay MUD is doing has fallen. When you dive a little deeper, some of that is tied to rates. There's also a lack of customer understanding about East Bay MUD. People might know who we are after a main break or when there's a rate increase, but they're often not aware of our responsibilities, the array of our responsibilities and programs. And finally, as communication needs continue to grow, our staff resources are stretched. So with this knowledge and research in hand, we set out to create a communication strategy that aligns with EBMUD's mission, strategic plan, and values. And so we started with this vision: to engage and build trust with our diverse community through creative and authentic storytelling that supports our mission and highlights EBMUD as a key partner in protecting public health and the environment. Based on what we learned and the importance of what we do for our community, we believe this vision is the right place to set our North Star. All right. So to achieve this vision, we have identified two main areas of focus, both in the near and long term. First, we want to raise awareness of East Bay MUD as a vital and innovative part of the community. It's not just because we want to be liked, although that's nice. We're part of the community alongside our customers and stakeholders. When we're out discussing a project or doing work in the street or asking for water use cutbacks, we want there to be some context around why we're doing what we're doing and trust that we are doing it to serve our community. Second, and perhaps in reverse order, we want to unify and streamline communications across East Bay MUD. We all interact with our community in so many ways, and each of us has a role in community and stakeholder engagement. Shared understanding of key messages and communication priorities, along with access to information, will help us ensure focus, consistency, and accuracy. Any start to building understanding and streamlining our communications rests on focused messaging. We said we want people to understand who we are and what we do. We need to tell them clearly, consistently, and often. This begins with key themes which are also reflected in our centennial effort. Theme 1, a rich history of serving and supporting our community. Having served our region for nearly a century, we're proud to be a community partner in the East Bay. That's not to say our history isn't without controversy. Our goal is to recognize and acknowledge our full history so that we can move forward with authenticity. Theme 2, investing for the future. With a century of service comes aging pipelines and facilities, as we all know. As we look to the future, we must invest in the infrastructure that makes up EBMUD's complex system while also ensuring affordable service for customers. Theme 3, environmental stewardship. At East Bay MUD, we rely on our natural resources and are committed to the preservation and protection of those resources now and for future generations. As we face increased challenges due to climate change, drought, wildfires, etc., it's important for East Bay MUD to articulate how we're planning for a sustainable future. Starting with this plan, these themes will be integrated into our communication going forward.
So let me just dive a little deeper into those two overarching goals. Goal 1, raising awareness. We know East Bay MUD has numerous information channels and tools, but a common thread of the East Bay MUD story and key messages is missing. Overall, our information materials lack a cohesive look and feel. We also produce a wealth of information, and we do conduct extensive outreach. Even so, it's not always as far or as wide as we would like, or our messages are one-offs and they lack some consistency. And finally, it remains a challenge to reach all customers, as Director McIntosh was just indicating, including many who never receive a bill and those who don't speak English, who speak other languages. With this in mind, we want to develop and consistently share East Bay MUD's story of who we are and what we do, create a theme-based messaging calendar highlighting service, innovation, people, and programs, amplify that content through more proactive media and communications, establish more community partnerships and collaboration to help our messages get out to the people we might be missing, increase outreach to traditionally underserved communities, and create more access to information through online resources through a digital-first approach. For goal 2, it became really clear that through the development of this plan that we needed to look internally to achieve consistent and cohesive external communication. So here we want to implement internal communication strategies to unify our employees and organization around East Bay MUD's identity. The Centennial outreach and communication efforts we think provide that we presented to you in February create a great opportunity to kick off this theme-based content in-house and tie those efforts to our longer-term strategic plan. We also want to establish processes where we regularly educate and inform our workforce about our communication focus. And this involves sharing that theme-based content that we talked about so that we can raise awareness among staff about overarching messages, communication themes, and project-specific information. This not only equips staff to serve as effective ambassadors, but also allows for better two-way communication, bringing important input back from the community to inform future communications. We want to start by integrating outreach and messaging focus into employee orientations, and we're working with Derry's group on that, and then continue by ensuring easier access to information for all our workforce. Finally, to make all this work, it's become clear we need to establish internal processes that allow us to better prioritize and streamline communication activities and create even better cross-departmental coordination. The next two slides, I apologize for the dense text here. The next two slides show a detailed plan roadmap with the objectives, strategies, and tactics, as well as success metrics for the plan. One important point here is that this plan employs a stepped approach with strategies and tactics to tackle over the next several years. You can tell there's a lot of work here, and it's important to note that this plan sets a path based on what we want to achieve, not necessarily based on the resources we have currently. As we move ahead, enhancing resources, making operational adjustments, and prioritization will need to continue as we rely on this plan for our guide. Diving a little deeper, you'll see some of the key areas where we want to focus in the near term, including developing that cohesive EBMUD narrative or story, a translation strategy, which you've heard about in other presentations today that we're working on with the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Culture, quick fact cards that folks can keep in their proverbial back pocket, and importantly, and this is where the presentation format comes in, a new style guide that will create a more modern, refreshed look to things like our presentations, fact sheets, press releases, etc. What you're seeing today is just an example of what an updated style guide could look like in terms of a presentation template. This isn't final by any means. And finally, we'll be using the principles and practices outlined in the plan in our Centennial work. While this plan is being developed, we've also continued with important priorities, many of which dovetail nicely with the strategic plan. As the Planning Committee heard this morning, we've already expanded our community education and outreach through a variety of methods, including the Water Wednesday seminars, Community Water Academy, and other online tools. In addition, we've made sure we've embedded the key goals and objectives of the strategic plan into the Centennial effort, which will serve as a launch pad for the plan. What's next? As I mentioned, we'll be leveraging the Centennial commemoration to focus our messaging, raise public awareness of East Bay MUD, and engage employees. Beyond the Centennial, we'll implement the strategies and tactics outlined in the plan in support of those two main goals. And we'll also be assessing community feedback, our focus areas and activities, and adjust as needed. Finally, I should note that the strategic communications plan isn't an endpoint, but a beginning. The plan offers a stepped approach. In the near term, we'll be focused on foundational pieces and then building on those into the future. Speaking of the future, so we hope with this plan that we engage more effectively with our community around who we are, what we do, and why we do it in order to build trust and understanding of our work to deliver vital water and wastewater services. This will rely on increased clarity and consistency of messaging, enhanced internal coordination, and understanding about the important role we all play in engaging our community. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
Questions? Yeah, Frank?
Awesome presentation, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm gonna go a little old-fashioned for a minute. Our plant book and the other book, its name was MUD, has been, I've found, a useful tool to give as a gift here or there. And I know they're expensive and the like, and I think we sold out of all the hardcover, didn't we?
Yeah, I think the plant book is in fairly short supply, but I'd have to
You
check
have the
on that.
soft cover of the plant book, right?
Okay, but I'm not sure if that fits anywhere in there, because this is great for reaching our public, but there's another component of our public, the agencies that we interface with. And so it's as much selling ourselves to them as well. But I'm looking, this is pretty exciting.
Thank you.
Looking cool.
We think so too.
And we're gonna spend some good money, I noticed, on Centennial.
And its name was MUD. I mean, it's a very good book, but as we've heard from the board and things that we're working on, it doesn't tell the full story.
It's a little light.
Yeah, and so we really want to tell the full story of the history, the good and the bad within the story. So we probably won't kind of redo Its Name Was MUD, but tell our history maybe in a more digital format that covers the breadth of our history.
And I think that's the idea, you know, give the history in a form that somebody can dig into it, and whether it's digital or a hardcover. I mean, yeah, I'm old-fashioned. I like to feel the texture of the book, but get that story out there along with all the other cool stuff you're doing here.
Yeah, and just so you're aware, as part of the Centennial, we will be working on like a historical online flip book, as well as a historical video, and it will delve into the many facets of our history.
Go ahead, Bill.
I think, you know, kind of looking at Snowflake to the Bay, understanding our history is quite important. And we can do it in exciting fashion. One of the things you have to remember is that there has been transition. Oftentimes when we talk about gentrification, there's people going out, and not just because of economics, they're leaving for all kind of reasons. So our public is new, so to speak. And these things have to be brought in because some of them don't know East Bay MUD's history. And the more that we can put that out there as part of the Centennial, the more effective it will be. And people will be anxious to absorb that information. I know in talking to young people today, many of them haven't had the same exposure. Our schools haven't done the up-to-date job. We went through them, and so we touched the least age-wise of our populations, and many of them carried the message up through the family. You see, we've done all kind of unique things, and I want the people who did those things and were with us in the past, some of whom are not here now, to get their due credits, because that's been very important in our rich history at East Bay MUD.
Thank you.
Yeah, Marguerite?
Yeah, I'll get to refer back when I do the planning committee report. But we had this morning, I mean, one component of this obviously is the education we're doing with our K-12 and other entities, and it just, you know, if that's a preview of what we can expect out of the communication strategic plan, I mean, it's very exciting and lots of, you know, useful tools. If making our website work better is part of that too, that would be great. So that Google doesn't do a better job of finding stuff that we offer than we're able to do. Which I know Doug's raised that if he needs to ever find anything on our website, he goes to Google, and I found that that's easier to do as well. So that's it's great, and I'm very happy to see it. I love this thing I like the best is the story maps. So
They're great.
and sharing those. But there's some other great stuff in there that you know, is very shareable and yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? I wanted to ask. I think this is great, and as a communications guy myself, I you know, I just really enjoy seeing this sort of discussion, having this kind of discussion and everything. I'm curious if I can use an analogy maybe to a restaurant. My question goes to, you know, how much of this is changing, how much of it is repackaging, so you can, you know, change the look of the menu and how you describe the foods, but really it's the basic foods, or you can actually change the recipes, and you can change not just the presentation of the food, but the actual items on the menu. And I'm curious, you know, just in your rethinking how we're doing this, how much of this is kind of a repackaging so that people will understand our story better, and how much of it is actually changing our story in some way, or who we are, or perception of that.
So I think two things about that. One is that I think what we're trying to do with this is kind of hone down to, you know, if you know, you want to use the restaurant analogy, not having a giant menu of lots of different things, but really trying to focus on, like, this is what we're about. Mm-hmm. And we want, and then articulating that more broadly. And so, like, always going back to those kind of touchstone key messaging themes. And so it's kind of more about honing, I think, than it, you know, and there might be some, I guess, repackaging as you're calling it, but I think it's sort of giving it a refreshed kind of look and feel outwardly, but then just going back to those key messages, those foundational pieces, and just not ever overlooking an opportunity to just go back to those messages, so that every time we're out talking to people, we're talking about those key themes.
Mm-hmm. And you had talked about those key themes at the very beginning, which look like good ones. Great, thank you very much. I appreciate that answer.
Great presentation.
Thank you, Kelly.
Okay, yep, thank you.
And last attaches the monthly report. I can certainly answer any questions you may have, but if you don't, I just want to remind the board, after the board meeting, at our next board meeting, we will be celebrating Eileen's retirement. So if you can stick around afterwards for that, we will have an event after the board meeting.
Great. All right, we'll now move to reports and director comments. Minutes from the May 24th Finance Administration Committee were included in your packet. We'll now receive reports from this morning's Planning and Legislative Human Resources Committee meetings. And since John isn't here, we won't have the Los Vaqueros meeting. We'll have that update next meeting. Go ahead, Director Young.
Yeah, so the Planning Committee this morning got an update on our private sewer lateral program, which is going quite well, and this is what's required under the part of the consent decree, where we really working to reduce inflow and infiltration of stormwater into the sewers, and folks' private sewer lines need to get replaced in order to do that. So we heard that report. And then the other two items were paving, which we talked about this morning or this afternoon earlier, and then lastly, related to our last item, we got a great presentation on all the educational programming that we're doing, not just K-12, but also workforce and community and facility tours and Water Wednesday and lots of great stuff. So,
Cool stuff.
yeah.
Thank you. Director McIntosh.
Yes, the Legislative Human Resources Committee met this morning, and we received a legislative update on 3 bills, AB 2142, Gabriel, which it's about income taxes exclusion for turf replacement water conservation programs. S 4231, a Feinstein bill, we voted to support as well, to rehydrate the Environment, Agriculture, and Municipalities Act. And finally, S 4279, Padilla, and that's the Water Efficiency, Conservation, and Sustainability Act of 2022. We also received an update on our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Strategic Plan. And finally, a fiscal year 2022 Equal Employment Opportunity Program / Affirmative Action Program report. And I did ask Risha if she would make sure that we all had a hard copy of that report for 2022. It was in our packets, but it required a lot of printing and downloading. So I asked if we could each get a hard copy so we can have some time to really delve into it before it's on our next agenda. And that was it for Ledge HR.
Great, thank you very much. Other items for future consideration, please submit those to the general manager. And director comments, are there any director comments? I see Frank's finger and I see Bill's.
After Bill.
I wanted to relate my attendance at the Oakland NAACP meeting on Saturday last, and they are planning an event to be held. It's called the Juneteenth celebration, June 25th. It's going to be out on Brockhurst Street in North Oakland. Event hours from 11 to 6, and it's open. So they'll be having some history told there about Juneteenth. The second item is that on the 19th, coming up Sunday, the Oakland Police and Fire departments are having a barbecue kickoff. It's at Defirmary Park. It'll be from 1 to 4. It's a free event. They're not charging anything. I had a chance to talk to some of the organizers and reminding them how we brought enforcement for the fire hydrant openings that were occurring in Oakland. And that's when we brought police and fire together, and this department, we led that entourage. You could imagine going forward, if people hadn't come together around that, what you'd have in terms of a drought. Well, I'm part of that history, and it's all going away now because new people are here. And we have to continue to engage. So hopefully we can renew some friendships, some of the accomplishments together, and go forth. Because many of the firemen, many of the policemen are new to the city as well.
Thank you, Bill.
I want to say something.
Okay. Frank, and then Marguerite.
So on June 4th, there was a charity golf tournament for the veterans in Castro Valley, and East Bay Mud floated a team that admittedly had a lot of fun, but didn't win any awards. And Mike Togolini, Matt Halawati, and Andrew Lee and myself went out, and we found as many golf balls as we lost. So it was a net zero. It was a net zero day. But it was probably the most wonderful weather that I've seen out there at that golf course in a long time. And then on the Sunday, which meant I had back-to-back 5 a.m. starts. I mean, real starts. The Castro Valley Sports Foundation had the Lake Chabot Trail Challenge. And boy, it was 1 month prior, the count was dismal, to say the least. And between the people that signed up in the last 2 weeks, as well as at the event itself, we had almost 400 people. And that was for both 5K and 10K. And then we got the surprise of all. It rained right in the middle of people finishing. So we gave them the excuse that we know you were going to be warm and all sweaty, so we thought we'd give you a cool shower at the end.
You took credit for being Mother Nature? You took credit for being Mother Nature?
Well, yeah, we
East
thought
Bay Mud, we
had.
always do.
But what's really cool is some of these folks were running so hard, they were actually steaming like you've seen, football games and the like. So it was a great event, and in particular within our own, between us and regional parks. So I just thought I'd give a quick report on that.
All right, thanks, Frank. Marguerite?
Two things. One, I was actually surprised it didn't come up in public comment, but just wanted to recognize that this June is Gay Pride Month, and all of the rainbow paraphernalia out in our lobby, and Andy has added a rainbow background to his Zoom screen, but encourage people to take part in activities and connect with our LGBTQIA plus. I have to tell you, I am not a fan of adding more letters to our designation, but maybe the plus will just take care of it from now on. But just get to know a growing contingent. And the second thing I wanted to comment on is that we have in our midst, I do some work with a group called, or I don't really do work with them. I am a fan of a group called Holy H2O, spelled WHOLLY H2O. But a constituent of mine, an employee of East Bay Mud, who I think maybe has worked in every department that there is in the district at this point, or is closing in on it, John Bauer, also happens to be an expert on Temescal Creek, which is a creek in my neighborhood, and he works with Holy H2O and has developed or did his master's thesis on it when he was at San Francisco State, and I think it's an example of the kind of, sort of watershed profiling that we want to do, that tells the story of East Bay Mud, Temescal Creek. What's left of it was part of what is now Lake Temescal and et cetera. So I think it's, I just wanted to recognize his work and contribution in the community, and hold up this example of the Walking Watersheds work that Holy H2O is doing.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Marguerite. Any other comments? All right. Well,
If I may join.
Oh, go ahead.
If I may join Director Young in recognizing Gay Pride Month for our whole district community. This is an important time to recognize gains in equality, but also the tremendous threats that are out there to public safety that affect our most marginalized. And I think this is an important part of all of our work for supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion for all affected groups of the district. And happy Pride.
All right, thank you, Andy. With that,
And Juneteenth?
Juneteenth.
Bill covered the Juneteenth, which is on the same day.
Juneteenth on the 20th will be the first time we've officially recognized that as an East Bay Mud holiday. So
that's right.
And Flag Day.
Although we're flying is Flag Day on the 19th? No, it's the 14th.
Today.
Today, right? We are flying the pride flag outside, yeah.
All right, any other recognition we're missing here? Very good. I think we're all proud of our efforts to give recognition to everyone who may look at the community and the support differently, the world differently, and respect that and honor it. And so I'll close the meeting with that thought. And our next board meeting will be held Tuesday, June 28th at 1:15. This meeting is now adjourned.